Find out what you actually need to start crocheting. It's not as much as you think. Hi there, I'm Cilla from Cilla Crochets, and I'm here to cheer you on throughout your crochet journey no matter what stage you're at. In this video, I'm going to talk you through all the materials you need to start crocheting. Before I get started, I just want to explain that my recommendation is to actually learn some foundational stitches before you jump in and make a project. Now, I understand the temptation to get a crochet kit or to choose a project and just get started crocheting straight away. And while that definitely does work for some people, it often doesn't work. I know this from experience. I've tried teaching a few people how to crochet. Some of them stick with it and some of them don't. It's fine either way, but that is why I wanted to do this video, to show you what materials you actually need to figure out whether crochet is for you or not. Because if you are not dedicated enough to learn those foundational stitches, the reality is you're probably not going to finish your first project. While that's maybe a bit of a downer to start this video on, I thought it was important to be honest with you so you don't waste money, so you don't waste your time, and you can still give crochet a try. So first up is yarn. Now, I've got two examples here and a lot of tips to share with you about choosing yarn for beginner crocheters. First thing is just buy one bowl of yarn. Second thing is the color you choose. I recommend choosing a light or bright color. These are two very good examples of what I mean by that. Mainly because you want a color that is really easy to see when you're crocheting. So I highly recommend not choosing a white, a black, a dark brown, or a navy yarn color, because your stitches will be so hard to see. Even for more advanced crocheters like me, it's still really hard to see. I often have to wear like a neck light, you know, one of those reading lights when I'm crocheting with a dark color yarn, because it's difficult to see your stitches. So if you're learning, you want to avoid that. You want to make it easy for yourself. So choose a light and bright color, like these. Next up is yarn weight, which you may have heard already, but maybe you don't know what it means. All yarn weight is talking about is the thickness of that yarn strand. So what I've got here is worsted weight yarn or medium yarn. In the UK, it's called Aran yarn, A-R-A-N, but basically it's a middle-sized weight yarn, which again, I would recommend for beginners. If you go to a lighter yarn weight, like a DK or a fingering yarn, it's going to be quite fiddly, and also because it's smaller, it can be a little bit harder to see. And conversely, if you use a really thick yarn, it can actually be a little bit more difficult to crochet with. So until you're used to actually crocheting, I recommend not going too big in yarn weight either. So a worsted weight, a medium, smack bang in the middle is what I would recommend for beginners. Next up to think about when you are choosing your yarn is the fiber. So these here I've got, these are cotton. So 100% cotton yarn. I personally prefer using cotton yarn because again, the stitches are just really well defined with cotton and it makes them easier to see and easier to count, which is good for beginners. Also makes seeing any mistakes easier. So when you're learning, you want to be able to pick out those mistakes so you can undo stitches and redo them. So cotton yarn is great for that. Another alternative is acrylic. I personally don't like acrylic because I find it a little bit scratchy, but it is another good beginner yarn to use. Or you can use a cotton blend. So you can find a yarn that has 50% cotton, 50% acrylic, or it could be cotton and bamboo or cotton and wool. Anything like that is a good starting point. I would just avoid any textured yarns or fluffy yarns. I know they're really popular at the moment, the chenille, like this one here, my Pluto the Platypus is made with a chenille yarn. They are lovely, but they are not good for beginners, I'm going to be honest. And that is because they can shed. That chenille often can shed. But also it's harder to see your stitches when you're learning how to crochet. So stick to a more simple fiber and you will find the whole process of learning how to crochet a lot easier. So that is it to do with yarns. They're all my tips to do with choosing a yarn for learning how to crochet. So choose a light and bright colour, a worsted weight or medium yarn size, and then cotton, acrylic, or a cotton blend yarn. Next up is choosing a crochet hook. So when I first started crocheting, I started off with a kit that looks a bit like this. It was great, it did the job. The aluminium hooks that you see here, absolutely fine to crochet with. But in all honesty, if you are first learning to crochet, you don't need this much. So unless you're super dedicated, you know that you're going to stick to the craft, you know, go ahead and buy something like this. But if you're not, I would say don't do that. Scrap that. Just buy one crochet hook that fits the yarn that you've chosen. So choose your yarn and then choose a crochet hook accordingly afterwards. So for example, if you chose this one here, Creative Cotton Aran, on the back of the yarn label, it gives us a nice little size guide, hook size guide. So this is suggesting a 4mm to 5mm crochet hook. Now, I would recommend using a 4mm crochet hook with worsted weight yarn. So if you have gone with what I've recommended, a 4mm crochet hook should be fine. Just so you know a little bit of extra information, the 4mm bit is actually the size of this section of the crochet hook, and that is where the yarn sits tightly as you're crocheting. So it determines the size of your stitches. Now, this crochet hook I'm holding, I would not recommend for beginners. It is a Clover and More crochet hook. It is my favorite type of crochet hook, but it's more expensive. It's about 7 or 8 quid for just one crochet hook. Now, you should be able to find a crochet hook elsewhere. I'll link to some below that are ergonomic. So ergonomic just means that they have a nice comfortable handle at the end of it to make the crocheting experience a little bit easier. The full aluminium hooks I showed you earlier, they are fine to crochet with and they're most likely a little bit cheaper, but I haven't seen them sold individually. So if you find them individually and they're cheaper than an ergonomic hook, and you're just wanting to, you know, dip your toes in the water when it comes to trying to crochet, go ahead and get one of those, give it a go. You'll still be able to do the exact same things I can with this. This is just because I am a little bit more on the obsessed side when it comes to crochet, and this is easier for me to crochet with. It makes me faster, and I find it more comfortable. But you can get middle ground crochet hooks that are ergonomic, that have this, you know, squishy grip, but is cheaper than this one here. So I recommend trying to find a 4mm ergonomic crochet hook that is a little cheaper. As I said, I'll put some links in the description below for you. Next up is, I bet you know what they are. They're scissors, but they're a special type of scissors. These are yarn scissors. Now, when I first started crocheting, I thought I could get away with using my normal craft scissors at home or kitchen scissors. I think I tried both. Neither worked. So basically what I mean by neither worked, they did, but I had to cut the same bit of yarn multiple times for it to actually cut into. It became very, very frustrating. So I do recommend either buying some yarns, scissors, or snips. So snips, I'll put a photo up here. I had snips to start with and they were perfect, and you can get them really cheaply. You can also pick up some yarn scissors really cheaply as well. But trust me, it will save you so much frustration when you're learning to crochet if you have proper yarn scissors. Next up are stitch markers. So I'm going to show you a few different types, but I have a top tip for you because I don't think you need to buy these. So this is a stitch marker. This one is a plastic one. They are really common on, you know, marketplace platforms that I will not name. These ones are metal and they have a sharp point, so they're more like a safety pin. And then you have fancy stitch markers that can look like this. I need to put background, there you go. So that just has a little lobster clasp on it, if you can see that, and a little charm at the end. So, you know, it's a nice thing to look at when you're crocheting. You're probably thinking, if you haven't seen these before, what on earth are these things? Well, stitch markers just help us track the number of stitches we are crocheting in any given round or row. And counting is really important when it comes to crochet, let alone learning how to crochet, because it can completely make or break a project if you are not counting your stitches correctly. So these little contraptions help us do that accurately. All you do is you stick them in the first stitch of any row or round, and that allows you to know when you get to the end of the round and when to count your stitches. It's even more important if you're making amigurumi and you are crocheting in circles. But as I said, you don't need to buy one of these. You can find something around the house that you already have that you can use as a stitch marker. So some examples include you could use a safety pin, a bobby pin like a hair clip. You can also use a contrasting bit of yarn, or if you've got a sewing machine and you've got some cotton thread, you could use cotton thread and just tie it through the stitch. Basically, I recommend not buying a stitch marker when you're first learning how to crochet, and just use something that you've got around the house until you know you are invested in this craft. Right, we're so close to the end. I promised you it wasn't a long list, and hopefully I've met your expectations. But the last thing, again, this is a bit of an optional, and I wouldn't necessarily say you need it right at the beginning, is a tapestry needle or a darning needle, which is essentially a sewing needle with a blunt tip. Now, I personally wouldn't get this until you are much closer to finishing your first crochet project, because you don't need one of these unless it comes to weaving in your yarn tails at the end of a project. If you are following my advice and just learning your basic foundation stitches before choosing your first project, you won't need this at the beginning. You know, you just need to learn those stitches, repeat them over and over again, choose your project, start your project, and then as you're coming to the end of your project, then go get some tapestry needles. But of course, as I said at the beginning, if you really want to get one of these kits, these cheap kits, you can. They were great. It set me off on the right path when I first started, so I don't begrudge them. I just think, knowing how many people I've seen start crochet and not get into it, you know, I've seen plenty that have as well. You know, they've started it, they've loved it, and they've continued crocheting. But then those that start and then don't continue and then are left with all of this crochet stuff that they're not using, it just seems such a shame. So essentially, I recommend starting with the basics, the really basic materials I've shared here today, learn your basic stitches, and then go on to choose your first project. And that brings me to the end of today's video, a really short, quick one, but I hope this helps you. And I hope you're feeling motivated to start learning crochet. I really cannot wait to see how you get on and see what you choose as your first project when it comes to that stage. If you have enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and in the comments below, let me know what you're most interested in making as your first crochet project. Or if you're already a crocheter, let me know what your first project was. I can't wait to hear from you. And if you'd like to see more videos from me, please do hit that subscribe button and turn the little bell on so you get notified when any new videos come out. Until next time, happy crocheting!